When I grew up, I had serious, deep-rooted anger issues. And not the kind of anger issues that you're probably imagining. And I'm going to talk today about how those anger issues really developed who I am and how I've changed that story throughout my life. So I should clarify a little bit. My anger issues were not me being angry and having a hard time controlling it. Quite the opposite, actually. I had seen anger lead to bad behavior, and so I just assumed, oh, anger's a bad thing. And so I just needed not be angry. And my coping mechanism was, if I did become angry, I would intellectualize it. And that was very easy because I felt like life is so amazing, and so my anger is not justified, and so I just would intellectualize and imagine, oh, I shouldn't be angry in this scenario. And that coping mechanism was highly rewarded in the society I grew up in. And what I mean by that is, for me to just not be angry was highly rewarded. People enjoy not being around someone who's not angry. So it was a very great coping mechanism, or it seemed that way. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about where that came from. My father growing up was around 350 pounds most of the time, and that's not all fat. He was a very muscular, big-shouldered, he looked like a linebacker, a football linebacker. He had just Hercules legs. And so that even though he did have a bit of a gut, he was just a very big, powerful man. And so when I was a small kid, he was a giant. I mean, he would have been a giant if he was a normal-sized human, but here he was, this super-sized human. And something that would happen sometimes is he would get angry, and sometimes that anger turned into a rage. And I have 3 siblings, and my siblings and I all knew immediately when the rage was happening. There was a certain, his voice would become this like, "Rah!" And you just knew, and your heart would sink, and once he was in a rage, there was no consoling him. So you would try to predict when he was going to go into a rage, and you'd do everything you could to manage his own emotions for him so that he wouldn't go into a rage. Because once he got into a rage, he did some pretty gnarly stuff. He would beat us severely at times. And I'm not talking discipline. He was capable of saying, hey, here's a boundary. If you cross this boundary, here's the outcome, or here's the consequence. And then he would enforce those consequences. So that was discipline, and my dad was capable of discipline. And I thought he was good at discipline. If he gave us a boundary and we crossed it, he would enforce consequences. He wouldn't just keep retreating and changing the boundaries. He really would say, if you do that again, this is what's going to happen. And you do it again, and sure enough, he'd enforce. So I'm not talking about the discipline. I want to be very clear about that. I'm talking about when he loses control of himself, so he's in a rage and he's misbehaving. So he, as an adult, has lost it to the point where he feels, oh, I've got to use my superior strength to beat these children. And one example is he did take a belt buckle to my face once, and in that moment, I want to tell you how I felt. So I felt completely numb. It's a magical thing. I think a lot of us can understand it. Let's say you get in a biking accident when you're a kid and you hurt something. You don't necessarily feel it right away. It's numb. The nerve endings don't bother sending those signals to the brain, or the brain shuts them off, or some magic happens. So I think most people have some idea of what I'm talking about, where you just go numb. And in that moment, I went numb. And I actually felt very big. I felt just expansive is probably a better word. And I felt like I was falling out of my body backwards into the infinite universe. That's how I felt. That was what was going on inside me as my dad was screaming and in a rage and not making much sense, but very much sending a lot of anger and animosity my way. And I just thought, let's fast forward to how I responded to that. So as I was growing up, what happened was anytime I thought someone was angry with me, I just assumed, oh, that's a bad thing, because I was so obsessed with this trauma that I had where my dad had raged and beat me in a fit of anger and rage that I just assumed, oh, anger is a bad thing. So there's two responses. Number one, I didn't allow myself to be angry. As I said earlier, I would intellectualize the anger. Oh, I shouldn't be angry in this case, so I'd calm myself down. Or if the anger was justified, okay, well, what do I do about it? So again, I would intellectualize it. So even if the anger was justified, it was, what are the next steps? What do I do now? And I wasn't allowing myself a third option, which is to just allow myself to feel angry and to allow myself to do that. So that was not an option to me growing up, or even in my 20s, even in the first part of my adult life. The other way I responded is if someone were angry with me, I felt that same feeling. Numb, tingling, expansive, and falling out of my own body into the infinite universe. And unfortunately, my response to that feeling was, wow, I need to manage your emotions if you were the one angry with me. So I would do my best to talk you out of being angry with me. I would try to make a case in the court of law, like, hey, you shouldn't be angry with me for evidence A, B, and C. Or see Exhibit A, don't be angry with Sam. Another response was I would just get away from you. Like, okay, you're angry right now, and that's toxic, so I need to be away from you. And a third response would be to recognize that it's your problem. Like, oh, you're angry, you're upset. That's something about you that's broken, and you need to fix it. And in certain situations, all those responses are perfect. So I'm not saying those responses are bad. I'm just saying that was my only set of responses. If someone were angry with me, those were the only responses I had. And again, society was fine with this. Here I was in school doing well and academically doing well, and I had lots of great friends. And so society was basically telling me, hey, Sam, all these coping mechanisms you have are perfectly fine and valid. What I didn't have as a coping response or as a response to someone who's angry is to be okay with it. And that's been a big journey for me, is to figure out how to be okay with how I feel. And the first step was just tuning in to how do I feel? If someone's angry with me, how do I feel? And I realized, wait a second, numb, tingling, expansive, like I'm falling out of my body into the infinite universe. Talk about amazing feelings. These are feelings I love. These are feelings I associate with letting go of some beautiful moment and just being in a moment. Or even substances that you dabble with in high school and college. You know, to me, a lot of it was about getting to that state of being numb or expansive. Certainly alcohol numbs you, and you often get expansive on alcohol. Like you're falling or you're falling out of your body. I mean, what wonderful feelings. And so it's unfortunate that those feelings were tied inextricably, what's the better word? These feelings were tied to this emotion, or someone feeling angry with me. Let me be clear here. So these feelings that I had, that I love, were tied, unfortunately, to this trauma I had as a child. So unfortunately, if you were angry with me, you triggered me, those feelings, you would give me those feelings, I would have those feelings as a response to your being angry with me, and unfortunately it would trigger me to that trauma. And when I use the word trigger, I think, oh, that's my opportunity to grow. So if you trigger me, thank you, first of all. If you find a way to trigger me, you're probably doing me a service, because you're allowing me to have a deeper relationship and connection to certain feelings. So I want to do just a quick aside what I mean by that. So what I mean by that, let's take this thread and let's say this is my father beating me and and this is my trauma associated with being beat by my father in a rage. So not disciplinary spankings, but actually being beat by someone who's one, out of control, and two, much larger than me. So that's a very scary thing to experience. So this is my trauma, right? Let's just set it right there. And then let's say this is my feeling of falling out of my body into the infinite universe. So this is those feelings. This was attached to this trauma. And the problem is, anytime as an adult I felt like I was falling out of my body into the infinite universe, it would trigger me to this trauma. And so I would respond like I did as a child. I would try to manage the emotions of the other person. I would try to calm them down. Sometimes I would try to make myself small by trying to get away from that person or just be hidden from them. Or sometimes I would just assume it was their problem. So those are my three responses. But now I'm adding a fourth response, which is, wow, in some scenarios, those first three responses are just fine. Like if someone's threatening to beat me up at a bar and they're drunk and they're angry at me, my second response is great. Make yourself small and get out of there. Or my third response is like, recognize it's not about me, it's about something wrong with them. So these three responses are perfectly valid in some situations. But now I have a fourth response that I just love, which is to allow myself to feel. So I'm detaching this feeling of falling out of my body into the infinite universe. Instead of always attaching it to this one trauma from childhood, now I'm going to attach it to the present moment. So let's say a girlfriend tells me, Sam, I'm angry with you, and I want to talk to you about it. And I listen to her, and sure enough, she's doing something amazing. She's sharing with me something that's difficult to share. It's easy to tell someone they're amazing. It's easy to tell someone they're beautiful, or they behave well, or they're wonderful to be around, or they're great conversationalists. It's very hard to tell someone, hey, there's something that's just upsetting me about you. That's a much harder thing to do. So that's the event. And now, instead of me attaching the feelings I have about what she's saying to this trauma, now more and more I'm going to attach the same set of feelings to the present moment and this outcome of, wow, I'm having this deep, connecting, emotionally bonding conversation with my girlfriend who's sharing with me that she's angry. She's obviously not going to beat me. She's not going to take a belt buckle to my face. She's actually telling me she's angry because she wants to connect with me more deeply. So now this feeling I have is connected to, of course it's always going to be connected to this trauma, but now it's connected to something new. Then let's say another example. So another experience. My mother tells me she's angry with me because I wasn't around as much when her mother died. Well, she's not going to beat me, and she's just trying to share what her truth is, that I wasn't around when her own mother was dying. I wasn't around all the time. And that anger, she doesn't feel justified in her anger. She's just sharing that she was angry. So there's nothing wrong with that anger. It's those first three responses I have are not helpful, of trying to manage her feeling, making myself small or running away, or saying it's her problem. Those three responses aren't that great. Instead, this fourth response now is to let myself feel and let my mom express what she's going through in anger. And so now I'm attaching these feelings of falling out of my body into the infinite universe and being numb and tingly. Now I'm attaching it to yet another experience, which is my mom's opening up to me about something really dark that she went through, grieving her own mother's loss, or grieving the loss of her own mother. And then you could think of another event where someone's angry with me, and another event. And as long as I'm trying to be more present, now, more and more, when I have this feeling now, I'm not automatically triggered to some trauma. Now I can be triggered to any set of experiences, some of them bad, some of them, yeah, it was not good to be beat. but some of them beautiful, where my mom is sharing a dark thing she went through as she grieved, or my girlfriend sharing with me something where she was angry with me. So these events now, when I feel this feeling, now it's attached to so many beautiful things. It might still be attached, or it's still definitely attached to some ugly things, and that will always be the case, but it's attached more and more to these beautiful things. So now if you were to be angry with me, instead of me just automatically having my initial 3 responses, hopefully, depending on the anger in the situation, hopefully that 4th response will be okay, where I can just allow myself to feel, and then I can connect those feelings to that interaction with just you and be present in the moment with you and feeling my feelings. And the big takeaway for me from all this is having that 4th response of, okay, I can feel my feelings and I can connect them to the present moment. Recognizing those 3 earlier coping strategies or responses are still valid in some situations. But recognizing, okay, I have feelings and they're okay. And those feelings can be connected to a lot of different things. And so I don't know exactly what my entire process was to get to a healthier response mechanism to the feelings I have if someone's angry at me. But the straw that broke the camel's back, for me, I tried to allow myself to feel these feelings for a couple of months, and my beard turned white, so I'm not saying this is an easy thing. I'm not even recommending this. I'm just trying to tell you my story and what I went through. So I tried to really allow myself to feel this feeling. And it was so attached to that trauma that for me, it was hard. It was difficult to do, and it was fatiguing and stressful. But the straw that broke the camel's back was I allowed myself to go in my imagination back to a moment where my father had just gone in a rage and beat all 4 of us, my 3 siblings and myself. And I walked into his bedroom in my imagination and I said, "Mom, I don't need your help, but I would love it if you could listen while I talk to Dad. Dad, something is going on. Something big is going on when you rage. I don't know what it is, but it's not related to whatever we just did. So in your mind, you might think, oh, wow, the kids set me off, and so I needed to discipline them. But that's not what just happened. What just happened was you lost control, and something very big is going on in your own world, something very powerful, and I don't know what it is, but it's really affecting us deeply, all 4 of us kids. It's really messing with us when you are going into that deep state, and I think you need help." And the moment I did that exercise, again, I think it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know if I would have started with that exercise. I don't know if it would have been a big aha moment or not. But in that moment, after allowing myself to feel for a couple months, that aha moment was, oh my gosh, my dad is not a big, powerful human to fear. So I used to fear him when he would rage. But now that I'm adult, he's no longer, well, he's passed away, but even when he was alive, he was no longer beating us when we were adults. So to continue giving him that power made no sense. And then now I see, oh my gosh, he's struggling with his own trauma. In those moments, something's going on where he's trying to work through his own trauma that happened to him as a child. There's something big, there's something there. So suddenly, instead of seeing him as a 350-pound silverback gorilla that's very powerful, I suddenly saw him as a child when he was raging. And to this day now, if someone is very angry and expressive of that anger, ever since that aha moment, I recognize a lot of times, oh, they're not a powerful human who's threatening me. They might actually be a child or someone in a child state. They might be struggling with something. They might be in their own big thing that has nothing to do with me and everything to do with them. Or they might be very adult about their anger. but I no longer fear automatically someone who is in a enraged and angered state. Now I recognize, hey, sometimes people are in a rage and they're very adult, right? Like, well, I'll get to this example in a second. But a lot of times when people are in a rage, they're actually being very childish. So something big is going on. And they're in a rage and they're doing all this childish stuff. And so now I no longer necessarily fear being on the receiving end of rage and anger. Now I, instead of feeling like the scared child, I often feel like the comforting adult, or the at least helpful, supportive adult. Because I recognize, oh, this person is under duress. And I also want to make very clear that I don't think anger and rage are automatically a bad thing. For example, anger is a huge driving force in life. You can move mountains when you're angry. So anger, it can be detrimental at times, depending on the situation, but it can also be beautiful, depending on the situation. And rage as well. Rage is such a protective, powerful force if something bad is happening to you. So rage and anger, to me, it's helped society. For example, I don't know if we would have gotten rid of slavery if we didn't allow anger and rage. So I'm sure as people worked through abandoning slavery, there was lots of anger and rage that really helped those movements. And certainly the civil rights movement, anger and rage has been a big part of that and continues to this day. In the news right now, there's a lot of anger and rage about a situation that we can do better. So anger and rage, I'm not condoning as always good, and I'm not condemning as always bad. I'm saying, hey, anger and rage can really hurt your experience in life in some scenarios, but in other scenarios, they might be really beautiful and might affect change, positive change. So I think anger, it's not a good or a bad emotion. It's just yet another emotion that we have and that affects us in this big, massive way. And for me in particular, the first 30 some odd years of my life, I was afraid of anger, and I thought rage was a bad thing. And so I did my best to respond to it in the way that I did. And those responses were perfectly fine. But I'm so glad to add this new response, which is to allow myself to feel the feelings if someone's angry with me and try to connect to the present moment, especially if it's a connecting or deep or emotional moment with that person. Now I don't have to fear that. And finally, as far as anger issues go, one more that I'm just still on the journey with is allowing myself to feel angry. So I already talked in this video about how I allow myself to feel what I feel when someone's angry with me. And that's the expansive and falling backwards out of my body into the infinite universe, and the tingly and the numb. But also on the other side of that, I'm allowing myself to feel angry. And anger is like this hot, like I feel heat in my body, and man, you feel powerful, or I feel powerful when I'm angry. So there's feelings associated with being angry for me. And I've been on a journey to try to allow myself to feel that feeling. And it turns out when I allow myself to feel that feeling, I behave for the most part okay. There was one example where I shouted at someone and it was very ugly, and it was just something where I immediately was like, no, I don't want to behave this way. So I know that, on the tipping, the balance, I was always not allowing myself to be angry and behaving excellent. And then now I was allowing myself to be angry, and I did see a point where, oh, that's a little too much, and I allowed myself to behave in a way that I was not proud of. I wasn't terrible, by the way. It wasn't terrible. I just shouted, and it was a side of me that I was like, oh, that's not helpful. So, that is probably going to be an ongoing journey for me, and I welcome that journey. So I'm not suggesting I'm on the final, I'm not woke, I'm not on the final stretch on any of this. I'm just on a journey with this. I'm a work in progress. And my anger issues, I'm loving how I can allow people to be angry with me now, and I can allow myself to feel that and connect it to whatever's going on in the present moment, rather than continuously being triggered to some past moment. And then also allowing myself to feel angry. And dabbling with that. And I'm just grateful that I can add that set of feelings to my spectrum of what I experience as a human, because I want to experience all the emotions. Between now and when I die, I want to continue experiencing the whole spectrum of emotions. And that includes, sure, happiness and joy. Those are easy emotions. But grief, sadness, loneliness, these are all emotions that are going to continuously pop up in my life. And instead of trying to avoid them or treating them as bad feelings or trying to distract myself from them, so if I feel lonely, instead of just, oh, I've got to go get a beer with a friend, instead of thinking that way, just allow myself to be with that feeling and to really just feel it, and maybe even get rid of the thoughts for a moment that are allowing me to feel that feeling, and just feel the feeling truly. Because I want to experience all the emotions, and I want to experience them in different magnitudes or different strengths, if you will. So happiness and joy, I love the little happinesses and joys. I mean, I'm in love with this dog right now. This dog and I are buds, and that dog can just wag its tail, and it's a very simple joy. So it's joy on a very small scale, and it's fun just to have that throughout my day. And then joy on a deeper level is, after playing volleyball for 4 hours, there's some deep level of joy. I don't know why. But certainly the other emotions as well. So I don't want to just experience all the emotions, but I want to experience them to different degrees as well. Thanks for listening to me. I would love to hear any comments about your journey. If any aspect of this has resonated with you at all, please hit the subscribe button, the like button. That really helps me know if this is helpful content for anyone. And of course, your comments are the most treasured, because your comments are helping me understand your journey or what's resonating with you about my journey. So thank you again for your attention today. This was a big one for me to share, and I'm excited to share this story with you.